All right, today I'm going to be digging into a 2009 Yamaha YZ250f. As you can see here, we're going to replace chain and sprockets. These sprockets are completely destroyed. This chain is completely wore out. We're going to go ahead and replace both rear and front as well as the chain. We're also going to go through and service this bike. Also, the other thing we noticed was it's a little bit hard to start, which isn't super uncommon on these YZ250fs. But what I'm wondering is if we got a little bit of debris in that carburetor. So I'm going to actually walk through the process now of pulling this carburetor. We're going to go ahead and clean it. First thing I did was pull this cap off of the bottom of the carburetor. Notice that there was some buildup in the bottom of this cap, which made me think probably those jets are a little bit clogged up. So that's why we're going to pull that carburetor. That's going to be our first project, carburetor. Then we're going to go through, we're going to fire the bike up, we're going to completely service it. So spark plug, air filter, oil filter, and obviously the engine oil. And then we're going to go to this back end here and replace sprockets. So stick with us. This will be at least a 3-part video, maybe more than that, as we come up with things that are worn out or broken on this machine. We've also been doing some river riding on it. I don't know how you guys feel about river riding. It has absolutely destroyed the front side panels here, as well as the radiators and the radiator shroud. So you can tell everything's loose there. I'm thankful it did not pull the threads out of the fuel tank. That would have created a bigger mess to deal with. But right now, for sure, just want to tackle these side shrouds here, radiator shrouds, as well as maybe put some aluminum braces on there. If you guys have suggestions for aluminum braces for these radiators, aluminum guards, make sure and leave those in the comments below. Also, on that note, we're going to leave a handful of tools, some of the parts that we use, some of these kits that we put together down in the description below. Make sure you check those out. If you guys have questions or comments, make those known in the comment section below. I appreciate any feedback I can get from you guys. Thank you for watching. Also, if you have some videos that you'd like us to shoot on this YZ250f, make sure you leave those in the comments below as well. Thanks a lot for watching. Like I said earlier, this machine was a little bit harder to start, so I went ahead and pulled this bottom cap here. It's a 17 millimeter. Use a wrench in there. Turn that out. Wanted to see in here, see if there was any debris, dirt, or anything, any buildup, and there was a little bit, which makes me think that there's probably a little more buildup in here. What I'm going to try to do, because this bike actually did run pretty good, it was a little hard to start, didn't idle great. My guess is we've got dirt and debris in that pilot jet. A lot of times, if you guys live in a colder area where maybe you're only riding your bike 6 months out of the year, 8 months out of the year, a lot of times these carburetors will get built up with junk and debris during the winter months, and then you pull it out in the spring. You go to start it, it's hard starting, or it won't at all. So I'm going to try to just pull this bottom bowl off here. You grab a 3 millimeter Allen wrench here for this clamp. It's going to be really hard for you guys to see from your angle what bolts I'm taking off here. So I'm going to maybe point those out, and then I'm going to probably be in your way here while I unscrew things, because there's really only one angle to get to this carburetor. Obviously, before we did anything, shut this fuel off. So turn this fuel petcock in kind of the horizontal position, although it's at an angle, so not quite horizontal. Next thing, you've got a flat screwdriver, and that's going to hold this boot onto your carburetor. So I've got to stick my head in front of the camera here to pull this clamp, but this boot goes all the way down to the carburetor. Typically, it's a flat-headed clamp, and yours might be slightly different. Sometimes people swap those out for Phillips heads. Not really a big deal. Whatever style you have, but you want to make sure that it's good and loose. That way, there's a rib on this carburetor. You don't want that clamp to be loose here, and then you get to that rib and it snugs things up. So make sure that's completely loose. Now, at this point, I'm going to try to turn this, and my guess is it's not going to work, but you've got a little groove there. You've got a little groove there on your carburetor and on your intake boot. So a lot of times you got to get a little bit past that. You can either pry that away from it or just spin it. A lot of times you can spin right past it, but that's how you know exactly which angle that carburetor is supposed to sit at. So it's gonna hit there on this carb choke plunger here. So I don't think there's gonna be any way we can do that. So the next idea will be to grab this boot here and see if we can pull this off. A lot of times, especially if it's been cold, it is extremely brittle, and it's not terrible here, but I'm betting we're not gonna be able to pull this off. What I'd like to do is slide this whole thing back and then slide that carburetor up and down. So I'm gonna have a little wrestling match with that at this point. All right, I've got it turned enough. I'm gonna actually see if I can get in there with my Allen wrench and turn some of these off of there. I'm not totally confident that I'm gonna pull this completely off, but boy, it'd sure be a lot easier without removing. What some guys will do is actually remove the subframe, or at least undo the bottom 10mm bolts here, and on the other side, loosen up the exhaust, pull that off, which isn't a big project, but man, is little a debris that's in here, and it runs okay. I'd just like to be able to pull this bowl off there. So my problem is gonna be these bolts in the back. So I'm gonna grab actually an Allen wrench here. All right, I've got a real small 3mm Allen here. I'm gonna get in behind there, see if I can loosen these up, get those out of there. Okay, because of the way this carburetor is situated in there, what I'm actually do is pull this subframe, so that'll allow us to spin this air box and everything up and out of there. We're gonna have to go ahead and remove the seat anyways. The side panels need some work done to them. So I thought it'd just as easily be easy for me to remove the subframe, or at least remove these bottom bolts here and pivot it up. That way we can get to this carburetor a little bit easier. I just want it done right. I don't want anything loose when I'm going back together. If you can't get to some of those parts, it's just a lot easier to have that carburetor off, get it cleaned up really good so you're not having to do that again. So I'm gonna do that at this point. All right, we've got 10mm Allen here and here. This is also the kickstand bolt. Yours won't typically come with a kickstand. We didn't actually put this on, we bought it that way. So next thing we're gonna do is remove this seat, 12mm bolts. Seat's off of there. Now we will have to, I said earlier, clean that carburetor, we'll have to clean that air filter anyways, so we're gonna pull that no matter what. Okay, now these side panels will just come right off of there. We're gonna go ahead and remove that other side panel. We're gonna remove that exhaust pipe. Okay, we've got that exhaust pulled off of there. Obviously gonna inspect this exhaust, see if there's anything we need to do there. And we are ready to flip this up. So we've got our air box attached here. We've got it unattached from the carburetor, so it should just pull up and out of there. Well, I guess it's not completely attached from that carburetor, but we'll just kind of hold it there, lift that up. We're getting into our side panels here. I don't know that we're gonna have to go up much farther. Now we're able to get our carburetor pulled down slightly enough to get that out of there, I believe. So might have to loosen these side panels in order to flip this up a little bit more. So 8mm bolts there. All right, got those removed. Use your T-handle to do that, 8mm. Now we're able to go up even farther. So that is lifted up and out of the way. Now it'll be super easy to get to that carburetor. And we'll pull it kind of down slightly. Obviously still connected a couple different places. You've got your throttle cable coming in and on the other side. You've got your choke plunger up top here. You've got your fuel line here. I don't know what would be holding us up the most at this point. You kind of work your way down. So if you need to, remove the choke cable, do that next. Down here also might be holding us up a little bit. So we'll kind of take a look at that. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this. Really no reason to do that for this carb clean, but again, we're gonna do that anyways with the sprocket replacement. Okay, guards off of there and the cover there. That exposes that front sprocket. Again, gonna get that replaced, super grooved, in rough shape. So we've got a brace on the bottom. A lot of this is being held on by those hoses there. Okay, I'm grabbing a pair of side dikes, not because I'm gonna cut that fuel line as much as just get underneath of it and pry it off of there. So that allowed us to get that one off of there. We're a little more flexible there. All right, gonna remove this fuel line here. Same thing, side dikes just to kind of pry it off of there. What you don't want to do is just take a big old bite of that and break that fuel line. So if you can just kind of work it off of there like that. Got a little more fuel in that bottom bowl area there that's dumping out now at this point. Okay, got fuel line out of the way. That frees us up a little bit more. Pretty soon we're just gonna be pulling that bottom bowl off. All right, we got it to a point here where we can pull these bottom bowl screws off. This will be a whole lot easier to get to with this boot here. We've got some of those hoses out of the way, disconnected. Still not ideal, but it's gonna be a whole lot better than it was. Okay, got that one off of there. These other two are loose, ready to pop off. That back one, that's gonna be a pain. I'm probably gonna get from the other side. So this is our idle adjust there. And then this one here, just holding a clamp that's holding two screws on. We'll set that down. Like I said, I'm gonna go to the other side for that other one. All right, so got all four of those off of there. Now we're gonna carefully and slowly pull this bowl off of here. All right, got this bottom bowl off here. Probably wasn't necessary to remove this. There's just not that much dirt and debris down in here, but I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna clean these jets up, make sure there's nothing else stuck in there. What happened when I was going back together was actually our air fuel screw here, and I'll show you that here in a second. Our air fuel screw here, the rubber gasket on it, or the rubber O-ring here, came out in pieces. So gonna have to order a piece for that, which is a little frustrating. Just a little O-ring there that sits down right there to seal things up. So gonna have to get that piece ordered. Obviously, gonna clean this all up, carbon choke cleaner through those jets there, make sure those are free and clear, and then we can start going back together after we get these other pieces in. All right, pulling our pilot jet out here. That's a flat screwdriver, small. It's kind of up in there a little bit. Make sure you get a good screwdriver on there, a good hold before you start backing that out so you're not rounding that off. You get your hand underneath of it. Now this one's crucial. It's a very, very small orifice jet. That's what it looks like there. And I do like to see if I can see through it right away. So I hold it up to light, see if I can see through it. Now I can actually see through this one, but barely. So it tells me it's jammed up with something, which is a good indication that definitely needed some work. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean that one out. This is a 42 pilot jet, so kind of a standard size, not super small, but you do want to make sure you've got a good jet cleaner and can blow that out, as well as something to stick in there, get it all cleaned out. So if there's any buildup on the edges, you can get that out of there. All right, I've got that cleaned out. Now what I'm going to do is pull this main jet out of here. Main jet here is a 6mm. This is a much larger jet, so you should be able to blow through there fairly easily. You should also be able to see through there fairly easily. If you can't see through there, definitely want to take get an orifice cleaner and clean that out. So run that back in. I'm going to take carbon choke cleaner and just kind of clean this whole area up now before we start going back together. Also going to see what we need for that air fuel screw. All right, going to take our pilot screw, run that up in there, our pilot jet. Again, making sure your screwdriver is completely cleaned off. You don't want to take and run that jet in there with a dirty screwdriver. You're gonna cause issues immediately when you go to start this up. So take and run that in. Make sure you're going all the way. Make sure it's secure in there. Try to do your best to get this carburetor straight. Get that screwdriver straight in there so that you're not damaging that orifice. All right, I'm gonna take and clean this up what I see happening here is actually our air fuel screw, the actual O-ring that goes up into the carburetor is good. It's still up in there. It looks like it's in good shape. There's a O-ring that sits here in this groove that seals up this from your actual bowl. So not a big deal that this is gone, but you do want to get something in there. So it's not as crucial as the O-ring that's up here. That would be absolutely important. Your bike would never run right without that. This one here, just kind of a secondary seal to keep anything from getting up in there. So I'm going to go ahead and find something that's going to work right there. We're going to be able to put this carburetor back together. All right, have the bowl cleaned out, have the idle screw or the air fuel screw ready to go in, found the O-ring that we need. Slide that up into place there. I'm going to start with the back side here, just because of the challenge of getting it together. Make sure everything's sealed properly. Make sure your O-ring on your bottom bowl there is in good shape before going back together. We've got our Allen screws here. Again, making sure you get all of those hose mounts where they need to be. Those can be a bit of a pain in the rear to get into place there. So I'll try to get these started. I won't bore you with all the details. Sometimes just using your Allen to get these Allen screws up into place is what's easiest. You can't hardly get your fingers back there. It's very difficult to get things lined up. So if you set that Allen screw inside of your Allen wrench here, especially if you've got a T-handle or something similar to it, that can make things a little bit easier. So gonna go ahead and snug that one up. We've got our one front and center here. That one will be fairly easy. We've got one in the back here. No hose routing mounts there. I'll get you a link to a good Allen set that very, very helpful. These have a ball on the end of them, so you can see there, you can kind of tip them at an angle there. Hopefully you can see that. So that'll allow you to not have to go completely straight. Your screw obviously will need to be straight, otherwise you'll cross thread things, but that'll allow you to kind of start it in a better spot there. Okay, we've got our two on the front here. Get those to a good spot. We've got a little mount here that we need to get into place. That one going. Then we'll have our last one here on our front left-hand side. Snug that up. And don't forget our air fuel screw. We could actually do that at this point. Make sure your spring's on there. You got a good O-ring. Your washer and O-ring are in place inside there. Screw that all the way in. And then take it about 2 turns out. So snug it up. And let's see, we're going to start at 2. 1 turn, 2 turns. There we go. Okay, idle screw here. There's a little groove there for so your idle screw doesn't get pushed to the back. Grab our Allen, set it on there, and we'll snug this up. Okay, our fuel line had a bit of a crack in it, so I actually cut about 1/4 inch off, maybe 3/8 of an inch. So I'm actually gonna need to double check that we're gonna have long enough fuel hose. Right there we are. I'm gonna cut another 3/8 of an inch off, so total I've cut just over a 1/2 inch. So I'm hoping we've got enough fuel line there to make it work. So gonna go ahead now, making sure that we've got everything buckled up, make sure everything is snug. We don't want to have to do this all again. There's a fuel line or a vent line in the back that I've got to get down into the right holder area there. Might have to do that from the other side. All right, we are ready to throw that carburetor on there and get this machine fired up. All right, we've got the carburetor snugged up there. We've got it in the groove where I showed you earlier. Fuel line obviously on. We turned that fuel on, just make sure there was no issues there. I'm gonna drop this subframe down, connect this boot. Before you do that, you wanna make sure you've got your clamp on there so that you're not fighting that later. Throw that one on there. We're gonna take and slide this down. When you take and slide this down, it might try to, your shock might actually grab your boot. So just kind of keep an eye on that. Make sure you're holding that away from your shock. That way you don't rip your boot. Also your clamp might hold you up too, but snug that into place there. It's gonna take a little bit of work to get that completely down and seated properly. Okay, we've got our actual clamp here, our screw portion of it on the bottom. I don't remember exactly. It seemed like it was coming in from the top, but I just slid that down. It looks like it's gonna be a little bit better if it's on the bottom. So we'll see what that's like. I'll tell you guys what to do there. My head's gonna be in the way here for a little bit, but try to maneuver that boot onto that carburetor. Make sure it's completely sealed all the way around. You've got some hoses here that are gonna not allow you to see very well, so I'm gonna take them, actually push those aside till we get this completely on. And what I may end up doing is actually pull that carburetor off of the engine there for now until I get this seated properly. You do not want there to be an air leak, and it is very, very hard to see. So we've got our subframe down into place. So I'm gonna go around to the other side and see if I can get that boot into position. All right, we have the back side on there. We're just gonna double check the front side is on. Make sure you got good light so you can see, just to double check. There we go. It slid right on there. You can kind of tell when it slides down, it just slides down a whole lot easier. So we'll get that tightened up. I'm gonna push down a little bit farther than we need, and then I'm gonna tighten this up, and then I'll actually lift that subframe up just a hair to get those bolts in. Okay, we're gonna take and shove our hose for our bottom bowl on there. There we go, that's our overflow tube. Okay, we've got the carburetor on there. Now we're gonna go ahead and throw our exhaust back on there, put our subframe bolts in, and then we'll get ready to fire this up. One thing, we've got our kickstand bolt here. Make sure you've got the right one in there. And then again, you have to lift this up just a hair from where it was. Once you get that into position, we're going to use the exhaust spring deal there to get that hooked up. Okay, exhaust is on. We're going to hop up there. We're going to get this thing fired up. Probably going to need to choke it to start it. I don't know for sure. Sometimes what I'll do is actually break this cap free to make sure it's getting fuel down in there. We'll see if I need to actually do that or not. Alright. We'll need to adjust our idle a little bit, but we'll make sure it's warmed up first. That choke is on right now. We'll leave that on for 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll shut that choke off. Again, we'll still let it warm up for a little bit before we adjust that idle. But besides that, I'm letting that oil warm up a little bit before we get in and change that oil. Appreciate you guys watching.